Hello and welcome back to Premier Injuries. Today's video is the team reveal for the quarterfinals. Very exciting in terms of this fan team. There's a possibility of money from one of us. One of us is doing very well, one of us not doing as well. But I'm still confident going forward into this quarterfinal stage. But yes, we have to get to the team reveal, but just before that, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel because we've got so much good content coming out. Just to remind people, we've got a great video, a huge interview, an exclusive one with, well, go on, Ben, you explain who the brilliant guest is.
With former head of medical at Wolverhampton Wanderers, it is, of course, Phil Hayward. 11 and a half years spent at the club. A lot of that time was in the Premier League before he then moved to LA Galaxy for a short while. Now he's back, and we managed to catch up and have a little bit of chat about how great Wolves' injury record was during his time there. To give you a quick overview, since we've been recording data, back in the early noughties, no team has come close to the numbers that Wolves actually produced when they were promoted from the Championship. They came into the Premier League, I think it was 2018-19, and they suffered only 5 time loss absences compared to the team that suffered the most. That was 60 in that season. And in terms of days lost, there was 88 days, and you compare that to almost 1,400 elsewhere. I mean, the numbers were obscene. Wolves never suffered a time loss injury in training for the first 2 years of the Premier League. That only happened in the season that we've gone back. So Phil gives us a look behind the curtain, as it were, talks us about some of these techniques, the methods, and how they look to manage their squad and ensure that their availability levels for Nuno were as great as they were. So it is a fantastic catch up, and yeah, really, really enjoyed it. So if that's your bag, then honestly, you will not be disappointed.
Yeah, do go over and listen to that. But let's get into it today then. We've got our team reveals. The funny thing is Ben and I have both not seen each other's teams. So once again, this is a proper team reveal for he and I in terms of live on air. So literally we'll be clicking on it in just a second. But just before we get into it, I don't think Ben had that many people out, but I just want to let people know that I've had to take a -8 hit. And so going into this game week, I had Dumfries, Pavard, Wijnaldum, Depay, Griezmann all in my team because I was thinking what we kind of explained last week of putting the team together so that you could get those who are going to be in the semi-final, maybe the final. And it backfired quite spectacularly because, as you kind of said, Ben, Netherlands didn't look that good. So that was 3 players out, and then France just kind of imploded, and that was another 2. So 5 players that I had to sort out just to get starting 11 for this game week. But yeah, should we start with my team then, or do you want to go first this time around, Ben, because you are in first position?
Well, I'll take the mantle if you would like to Jason this time around.
Yeah, go ahead, mate.
Yeah, look, so quite fortunate in the fact that I managed to strike it lucky with a couple of teams. And as you mentioned, I have managed to ensure, anyway, I have 11 available players going into this quarterfinals. I did have to use 3 free transfers to get that job done. But like I say, it meant that I didn't have to mess with my team too much. Now, for those that have already, watched the quarterfinal review that we recorded late on Wednesday, that gives you a little bit of insight into the rationale behind the sum of our selections and where we go. So we'll start with the defence in the back line. And while for the majority of this tournament, I have opted for either a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3. And the fan team game certainly lends itself to rewarding those more attacking, more offensive players. It's just the way the points are built into the game. And that was the reason I always went for 3 at the back. But because of these limitations, as it were, I've had to, tweak that formation and go with a 4-3-3. Now, what I would say at this point, again, ahead of everything, I have 11 starters, but I've got no backup on the bench. And I would only really consider taking a hit for me is A, if that player is going to come straight into the team. And secondly, they're going to have to be a pretty, high-placed premium asset with a good likelihood of a return for me, because a -4 hit, certainly not for a defender, because you're looking at a minimum of a clean sheet really to justify that return. And anywhere, further up the pitch, it's goals or assists. And they're going to be hard to come by in these quarterfinals. I think there's some really tough ties in there. But here we go. Now, I do have the luxury of being able to choose between two keepers. I've got Simon from Spain currently on the bench with Donnarumma in goal for Italy. That isn't set in stone, I'm hastening to add at this point. Now, I've done it in the last round, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to do it in this round where I nail my colours to a particular team. And it goes against a lot of the things that maybe I'm seeing with my eyes and the data that we're seeing. But like I say, we discussed it, and well, in the last round 16, I went the Czech over the Netherlands. In this one, I think I may have to opt for Belgium over Italy, and there's a couple of reasons why I'm going to do that. One is I've had Belgium from the very beginning. Pre-tournament, they were my pick. So keep the faith, regardless of who the opposition is. They've shown that they can perform against, some of this competition's best teams, and they managed, maybe not deservedly, but they got past Portugal. And I just think, well, if you're going to go for it, let's just go all in and buy into it. There's no half measures here. So it could be that I may swap Donnarumma for Simon closer to kickoff. I'm sort of leaning towards that way. So that's my goalkeeping decision. Now, my backline, sticking with Belgium, I think Meunier, he's had a pretty decent tournament. He's had a couple of nice returns. He's been there from match day one. He's one of those players. Most of these players I was restricted and limited in terms of the fact that, I couldn't really mess on too much because all of those players that were missing were higher up the pitch. John Stones, England, and I think it's a great fixture as well coming up against Ukraine. So I'm very happy with that. 4 clean sheets on the bounce. And it wouldn't surprise, us to see maybe Gareth Southgate continue with this conservative approach, this maybe low block, looking for the likes of maybe the Raheem Sterlings and that to break the lines going forward on the counter, which bodes well for anybody that's looking to invest in that England backline, which may or may not include Jordan Pickford. The only reason that puts us off Jordan, he's the most expensive keeper in the game. I think in and around 7 million, so he's just a little bit too rich for me. But just erring on a side of caution slightly. I don't think it'll be the cakewalk that everybody seems to think it will be against the Ukraine. Psychologically, the mindset of the players is in a completely different place. I think this is the first match really that we're expected to go out and do a job. I know there would have been a lot of talk about Scotland, but you've still got that local rivalry and that fight. And, like a local derby, in domestic football, you can never quite, stay 100% that, you're going to go into that game and come out. Whereas I think for most, even the impartial pundits are saying it's got to be an England win. So I'm hoping England don't switch off and England keep a clean sheet. We talked about Laporte, I think it was around match day 3. And prior to match day 3, when Spain just, they weren't converting, they weren't creating a lot. Morata was struggling. Moreno, we've seen since, 2 decent games, I think back-to-back, 4 goals scored. No, that's wrong. They got 5 in the extra time against Croatia. And so they look a lot more comfortable, but I still think Laporte at 6 million as well, which is 500,000 less than Alba, who, but coincidentally, was dropped for the round 16. I think he offers that threat and that presence on set pieces. And and finally, Miele for the Danes, out of position, great going forward, got some excellent stats, and he's a bit of a bargain. And I just think, we talked about this matchup with the Czech and the Danes and how close it will be. My own feeling is that the Danes will take this momentum through. It's the Danes who've scored back-to-back 4 goals. They got 4 against Russia, and then they came and followed that up with 4 goals against Wales. And a lot of people will question that Welsh team, and it's just Wales, and it is this. But, even during that group phase, they weren't completely dominated by anybody, including the Italians. So I think credit where credit's due. I mean, the Danes were without Yusuf Poulsen as well for that game. So, so that's my back 5. I don't know what your thoughts are, Jason, on that. I know you're not really keen on the Spanish, defense, because it hasn't been great. But I mean, is there anybody in there that you would think maybe is deserving of being rotated out at the sake of a -4?
I'm very reluctant to take a -4, a bit like yourself, for a defender, because the likelihood that it will pay off is so minimal, because they've either got to get a clean sheet, which could or could not happen, and that's kind of a team performance there. And then individually, somebody like Miele gets forward, but again, it's not 100% kind of nailed option, whereas maybe an attacker might be more likely because they've got such a higher ceiling. So in terms of it now, I think what I'm also kind of contextualizing is the fact that you don't want to take a hit. So in terms of it, I'm not a big fan of Laporte, but we both kind of liked him because of his aerial threat. Going into that before the last game with Croatia, we looked at Spain and thought, well, they're controlling the ball and they are letting a few opportunities through. But in the Croatia game, we thought they'd totally dominate the kind of possession and control it. So, yeah, I like the back line. I mean, I've got a few of those players in there myself, so obviously I'm not going to criticise it. It's just, I think you're very bold with backing Belgium over Italy. That's my big bone of contention. But in terms of it, if it does pay off, I think you've got almost quite a differential dinnery call once again, and that'll pump you up the rankings even more. And Belgium are a bit like England in this tournament. They've kind of gone about it quite conservative, quite controlling the matches. They're not allowing their opponents a lot of opportunities, and that's why they've got a similar defensive record to Italy, and only England have kind of beaten that with 4 clean sheets in the tournament. But it just means that I'm a little bit reticent on them, whereas I think Italy, maybe I'm drawn in by the beautiful football, but as said, apart from that, I think it's a good choice. Looking at my team though, so we'll go into my back line, and I do have the man that you said was probably a little bit too expensive, Pickford. He's in between the sticks. I think against Ukraine, it's such a good opportunity there. So I already had him in between the sticks. Now, kind of going on last week's team reveal video, I've got a few teams in fan teams. So that's the wonderful thing about the game setup, is you can have 2 or 3 teams. And so this team has done the best and kind of pumped me up a little bit, but not high enough yet. Obviously, I want to be much higher than I am ranking at the moment. But so there was quite a big England contingent because, as I said, I wasn't sure about the England-Germany game, but I was going to risk it with one of my teams. Again, the fan team method allowing you to do that and go all in on England because I thought they were the more likely to win the fixture. So I got Pickford, I've got Maguire, and I've got Stones. And I like Stones and Maguire for their aerial threat as well. Watching that England game against Germany, I was really impressed with some of the set plays that they had. There was a few opportunities there. Maguire just didn't get his head onto it and enough power, and that could have been into the back of the net. So I think the treble up on England is not that risky, and kind of a lot of the betting data and underlying data of Ukraine would say that as well. Mile, we've already gone through because he's in your team, and I think the annoying thing is he might be somebody that you have to transfer out when we get to the next stage of the semis, because I'm not sure if they'll get to the final, and so he might be a transfer that you've almost have to do, but you do have 3 free transfers for the next round, and you just have to do what you have to do. But it's just a bit annoying that it might be amongst a few others if you've made the wrong call with who's going to get to the final. And then I've got Spinazzola, somebody that I think is just absolutely brilliant. Like we said here, this is where we really differ in approach. I'm totally backing Italy to beat Belgium, so I'm almost a bit sad, but my money couldn't stretch that far to have another Italian defender. I would have liked more, because I think it'll be England and Italy in the final. So yeah, we've kind of gone through the personal data of Spinazzola in yesterday's video, so if you want to know about how brilliant he is, do check that one out. But yeah, I think it's a strong back line, and I just hope to God England don't let me down and let in a sloppy goal, because it has been 4 clean sheets. They haven't let a lot of opportunities in, but then there was those freak moments against Germany where you thought, oh God, they've lost a bit of concentration. So hopefully the tactics see them through. I mean, do you want to pick apart my backline before we get on to your midfield?
I mean, it's hard to pick apart. I think it's bold. Treble England. I'm not as confident going into this game of England keeping a clean sheet as I ever have been. Just, low of averages would say, there's got to be a point of being fairly lucky on occasions not to have conceded. The results never really give a real insight into what's happening on the pitch, and it looks like we've been pretty solid throughout, but we still give up some decent chances. I think the last one where Havertz put Timo Werner through, it was a decent save by Pickford. On other days, Scotland could even have scored against us. So I think it's bold, but in terms of the data and the actual how the fixtures have been set out in the quarterfinals, they do look the most likely of keeping a clean sheet. But I just have a little inkling that the Ukraine may get a goal. With Yarmolenko, who's always going to be a big threat. And there's almost a part of it when I first seen that, I just thought, oh, I've got a little bit of FOMO there. I'll change things around. And then I remember that I can't really. So for me, there will be a lot of people who won't be happy with this format and will be having to take hits to field that 11. But for me, who's sitting quite pretty, it's quite a nice feeling, because before a ball's even kicked, I think my overall rank will improve massively.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking forward to seeing how far I can rise, like I say, before that the whistle blows in that first quarterfinal game, because there's a lot of people who went in big on the likes of your France and your Netherlands in particularly, who are now who have to pay the piper.
Yes.
And for me, it keeps it very, very interesting. I am playing the main Euro game as well. We've obviously got, I've got a wild card available, we've got free, and we'll see teams which are all more or less the same. On this format, if you don't want to take massive hits, inherently, you're going to end up with huge differentials across the board. And I like that. It keeps it interesting.
Well, you are differential dinnery. Just one last thing that might, sway people or keep people interested in terms of Pickford as a pick. Ukraine like to take a lot of shots. You look at their number of shots and they're fairly high in terms of the chart. So they've taken 44 overall in terms of the competition so far. But then you look at the quality of chances, and you look at the XG that they created in a tournament, and then it's only 6 xg, or if you take out the penalties, 5.5. So that puts them way down further. Only 29 shots in the box. And yeah, it fills me a bit of confidence that they might take a few speculative shots. And so once again, Pickford will get quite a few bonus points of save points. And it's a bit like the forwards of the kind of discussion that we had there, where if they just take a few speculative shots like a Churro Immobile, then all of a sudden you've got, 0.3 or 0.6 in terms of which position they're in, just for them not really doing anything of high quality. And a few speculative shots at Pickford, I'm sure he'll parry them away, and you boosted it up a little bit. So, I think that's another positive point. But let's look at your midfield then, Ben.
Yeah, so as mentioned, I went with a 4-3-3, which leaves a three. So there was one player that had to come in to this midfield. I lost Paul Pogba, so that did free up some funds, and that opened the door for Sarabia from Spain. Now, Spain have almost seemed to have found their rhythm in the last couple of games. Although, this Swiss side again will not be a walkover. They've shown against France, one, that they can compete against some of the best teams in the world. And secondly, they will fight until that final whistle. It's 3-1 down. I thought it was game over. They kept on pushing, they kept on going, and they got the result and took that all the way through to extra time and eventually won on penalties. So I don't think it's easy. I'm not keen on the likes of Morata and Moreno. I think they're too expensive for what they've brought to the tournament so far. And for me, Sarabia has been involved in other fan team entries that I've had. I was a little bit slow on the uptake for this team. I wish I had brought them in on the last round, but hey ho, there we go. And like I say, it's 7.7. I think he's great value. And if Spain can keep that momentum going, there should be a few goals in that game for them. And he's sitting alongside two midfielders, again, who both sat. I brought in Souček against the Netherlands. He probably has disappointed ultimately this tournament. He was one of those players that we pinpointed, we spoke about. He was in and around 5 million at the very beginning. We talked about his threat from set pieces and how his heat maps for his international, for his national team differed massively from West Ham, where he had that deeper role. Of course, he got that hat-trick back in March. So he came into this tournament almost as that dark horse, as a player that, could really shine. Almost like I had him alongside Gini Wijnaldum. For people to look at Gini and go, the Liverpool Gini, it's night and day between, the one that plays for Netherlands and while Souček has been excellent for West Ham, I see him as more of a threat for his national team, but that hasn't necessarily, come to the fore at this tournament. So hopefully, it's a big game. Again, this is opportunity. I do expect the Danes to progress, if the truth be known. And Insigne in midfield, great, excellent choice for fan team. Gets lots of shots in. Italy have looked pretty on the eye. They have looked really, really good. The only nagging doubt in the back of my mind is they haven't really played any top class opposition in this tournament. They haven't really need to. You kind of argue with the record. You beat what's put in front of you, and they've done that. A lot of people will be backing the Italians to get through and possibly win Euro 2020. But because obviously I've put my eggs in the Belgium basket at this point, that's why I've went the other way. But Insigne, look, I'll be quite happy with a high scoring draw in normal time, maybe. With Insigne getting a goal or two, which, but ultimately I want to see the Belgium through, and hopefully that'll be a gamble that pays off. I've had one or two which have done this tournament, and a couple of maybes which have backfired. So, I'm hoping Lady Luck's on my side this time.
Yeah, I hope that you continue your differential dinnery shout. I like Insigne, I like Sarabia so much that they're both in my midfield. And Souček, he has that ability. You know, the Czechs are a brilliant team in terms of set pieces and game management, and he's a central part of that. I have been disappointed as well in terms of his contributions, but we know how brilliant he is from his time in the Premier League. He can pop up, and it can be against any opponent because he's such a difficult player to mark and know what to do with. How do you manage a player who's that big but has also all those other amazing attributes about him? So he could do well against a Denmark defence that, yes, they've obviously kept a couple of clean sheets in the last ones, but then they've underperformed in other games. So it could work well there for you. Let's move it on to my midfield, though. And as I said there, I like your midfield so much that I've got 2 of your 3. So we don't really need to go into Insigne and Sarabia because they're so good. But I've got the man that we've been burned by so many times, Raheem Sterling. But I had him last week, and he did me an absolute solid. He was one of my best players. He got me a bit of a rankings boost, and that's why this was my best team. And so I can't really be too mad at Raheem at the moment. He's, as I said in the last video, which you reacted to very positively, he's had such a brilliant tournament. But Ferran Torres is the other pick in there. And we discussed this yesterday. I had my misgivings, I had my worries, and I still do. But I also know that with his data, with his abilities, he can turn up. And the Swiss defence has been kind of shown to be a little bit weak. If Spain are going to score, and I think that they'll make it to the semis, so this is why I'm kind of backing it. I need as many players as I can in the semi-finals. Then it's wise to get the players in, and I didn't like the defenders as we've kind of discussed. So the midfielders and the strikers seem to be the best options there. So Sterling, I think, is a solid pick just because he's, you know, the central bit of England's attack. Southgate, you know, trusts him a lot, and he's been creative. He's been thrusting that England team forwards. And Torres, maybe that's a bit more punty, especially because he's been in and out of the team. But I think his performances over the last game or a couple of games should secure him that starting position. Fingers crossed. I hope Enrique doesn't do an Alaba and, you know, drop him once again. Sorry, you're the Alba, not Alaba. And drop him again, because that would just be incredibly irritating. So, yeah, Sterling, Torres, thoughts and feelings, Ben?
Torres first. Had my fingers burnt with Torres early doors. I think it was pre-tournament. You convinced me with all the underlying data.
I'm sorry.
Of course, what I've seen up at St James's Park when he dismantled Newcastle for Manchester City. And, you know, again, in those first couple of games, just didn't really look anything of any real note. He certainly played himself into that Spanish team. What we do know is Spain will kick off the quarterfinals first. So we will get to see what team Luis Enrique goes for before the deadline kicks in. Now, if Ferran Torres is part of that starting 11, then for me, he's a great own, because if the Spanish win, I think he'll be locked in then for at least, you know, the semi-final as well. If he doesn't and he drops to the bench, then he's an expensive paperweight, even, coming off the bench and potentially scoring. I just think it's too much money to have tied up in Torres. So that would be my only concerns. But like I say, that the actual kickoff time in itself does lend itself to you being able to make that informed decision, and hopefully you won't get your fingers burnt. Sterling, not his number one fan, not by any stretch of the imagination, but can't knock what he's produced for England in this tournament. He continues the way he's going. He's got a good chance of getting the golden ball for those performances. Again, I'm just, and I'm looking for not necessarily, the cloud in the silver lining, because it looks like an obvious standout pick. But again, we're talking about if there's a shift in mentality, a slight change in tactics, then how does that affect England? And ultimately, how does that affect Raheem Sterling in his style of play? If England are sitting in there and maybe he's playing on the counter, they're playing fairly passive to then break through the lines in that transition, then Raheem Sterling is your outlet. He's the guy you're looking to because he's got that lightning quick turn of speed. If you change things up slightly because there's an expectation that you're going to dominate the Ukraine, then maybe does that take the onus and the emphasis off Raheem Sterling, and is he not as involved? Because we know England have got a lot of strength and depth all over the pitch, and dependent on how Gareth Southgate wants to set up his team, we could see Harry Kane coming a little bit more. Does he start Jack Grealish? You've still got the likes of Mason Mount who could come in, and Phil Foden. So I just think with this Ukrainian side, even if England do dominate and do get a great result, I don't think it necessarily means that Raheem Sterling is going to be the main benefactor of those goals, because maybe, there's a slight change in how, we move forward and attack that game.
Yeah, and it's a big risk. This is why I'm kind of uncertain on those two midfielders, if Torres starts, if Sterling plays in the same way. But just kind of looking at their underlying data and their performances so far, looking at the weight of the game, and also I think that they're not very much owned. So kind of looking at it, Sterling's 8%, Torres is 3% picked at the moment. They're good differentials with good underlying data that I think might be able to push my rank up just a little bit. So it's a risk worth taking. And the third point is that Sterling was already in my team. So with the fact that I've already taken 2 hits, I don't want to take another hit to take him out, even with all these risks. Let's move it on to the front line, though. And, you're talking about Sterling there, the England front man, but you've gone with a different England front man. Is this, what would John Barnes say, the master plan?
I hope so. He's not 100% locked in at this moment. Lukaku, Kane are the big hitters of this time. Don't need to touch upon Lukaku, being there since match day 1. And even when he hasn't returned, he's had a great game. I think he even got awarded the UEFA Man of the Match against the Danes. It was superb. So not necessarily rewarded in terms of fantasy points, but still putting in those performances. So, and if you've got Eden Hazard out and Kevin De Bruyne, then it's the likes of Lukaku's who should really stand up and be counted and carry his team and his country forward. But yeah, Harry Kane, I'm just hoping that goal against Germany is enough to kickstart him, and finish the tournament on a real high and strong. He hasn't looked great, in all honesty, in terms of his movement. Maybe it's the after effect of that, that little ankle injury that hampered him towards the end of the domestic campaign. We just don't know. He doesn't quite look at it, but we're talking about Harry Kane here, and an 80%, 90% fit Harry Kane is still better than most strikers in the world. And yeah, it's a quarter-final place in the European Championships here. So, the adrenaline and the occasion will get him through that day. And I'm hoping, like I say, that little boost of a goal against Germany is enough to get sort of Harry back in the frame and back on his game. A big thing for me, and it is a little bit of a gamble, I think he looks a lot better with Jack Grealish in the team, and I would be starting Jack Grealish. I really would. I would have him ahead of Saka. For me, I think he's done more than enough in his performances, either when he started or come on as a substitute. So I really think as if the platform's there for him to go out and play. He doesn't look in awe of the occasion. You would hardly think that he's almost a newbie into this England setup. He looks comfortable. He isn't bothered about who he's lining up against. We used to talk about this with Wayne Rooney years ago. He goes out and he plays the game like he does like a schoolboy. in the playground, just doing what he does because he loves it. And I think that's what Jack Grealish is. And he's got the ability to back it up. So I really do like Grealish, and I think Harry Kane would benefit from that.
He's like this generation's Paul Gascoigne, isn't he? In many senses, when defenders see him on the pitch, there's this psychological blow as well. Before the ball's even been kicked, they're like, "Oh crap, it's Grealish." And
look, I mean, I know a lot of people are questioning, that weight of expectation and can he handle it? Listen, this guy can. He absolutely loves it. I just watched a documentary on Cristiano Ronaldo about pressure, and they were talking to him about, when you go out, and he said, I absolutely love the pressure. If I didn't feel the pressure, I wouldn't play the game. This day I stopped feeling that pressure and I thrive on it, I'll hang my boots up. He says, it's that pressure that drives me to be the best. He says, I'm not only competing against the opposition players to show them I'm the best, I'm continuously questioning myself to say, can I do it? Can I be better? All day, every day. And I think there's a little bit of that in Jack Grealish, just wanting to go out and show, look, I'm the best. I'm more skillful than you. Can you get me off the ball? I'm going to do this. I think he's got a big future. So I'm hoping he's going to, channel some of that in our winker, that's CR7. And, he gets the start, and he's the main supply line to Harry Kane. And finally, Severovic. So he's me one and only Swiss representative in this game. I don't think it's home and hose that the Spanish are going to go through. Like you say, it's tough, and the Swiss are more than capable of getting a result. And if they are to get on the score sheet, then you would suspect that Severovic isn't going to be far away. Again, 2 goals in that round 16, draw, stroke penalty, shootout win over France. So again, he's coming in. Confidence will be high, will be brimming. Swiss will be a hard team to beat. And, again, we talked about ownership. He's currently 1% in the game. So, it ticks a lot of boxes for me. So that's why I went for him.
I bloody love Seferovic. And looking at my team, I would love to have him in, but I'm playing a little bit more conservatively. I'll probably get him in on my fantasy Euro, but in terms of this fan team, I come into this almost on the back foot anyway, and I almost can't take a risk and get somebody like him in, because next week I would probably have to take him out, and I've already got Millet. I don't want too many pre-planned transfers that I have to almost put out these fires. I want to tackle the fires that potentially my other poor decision making has made. And as much as I love Seferovic, and I might get him in on my other teams, but with my best team, the one that I potentially want to win money with and whatever, I think it's a little bit of a risk too far. And so looking at my front line, I've stuck with Immobile. I probably would have stuck with him anyway, even if I hadn't had this huge overhaul that had to do with my team. But he's just a great pick, and I think that he'll rack up a lot of potential shooting points against Belgium. I think Belgium will sit off quite a bit, and that will possibly allow Italy even more. The other thing that I would say about this Italy-Belgium game is Italy, again, you've kind of said they haven't played an opponent that's tested them too much, or a high-quality opponent, because Austria did test them. What I would say is Italy have already played Belgium light in terms of Austria, and so they took loads of shots, they racked it up against Austria. But what they also did was they almost learned how to play against a low block team that's going to sit off. Austria had basically 6 at the back for large stretches. And Immobile didn't do brilliantly, but the whole Italian team did work well and got the result over the line. What I also liked was, which is better about Fan Team than Fantasy Euro, was they had the cut-off at the 90 minutes. So Spinazzola kept his clean sheet, whereas in Fantasy Euro, I was so annoyed. I thought this is really unfair. Spinazzola did keep a clean sheet in the 90, but he did lose it. But he did get an assist anyway, so it's not too bad. But my point is I feel like Italy have almost already played Belgium once. They won. They were the better side. They controlled the game, and I think Immobile might do better in this game, as Italy. One of the big problems was Italy almost didn't have a 10 in the game. They didn't have somebody sitting between their midfield and the striker to kind of break up between the midfield of Austria and the defence of Austria. And they might deploy somebody in that role just to kind of create those passing opportunities, because they're going out wide each side. They were passing in middle nicely, but they just couldn't get that ball to Immobile. So that's one of my thinkings with him as a good pick for this. My other pick is Morata. Now, after he's burnt me already this tournament, he's really annoyed me. I don't think I have the captaincy on him. So for people that is on screen, that's more of an accident. I think I was just clicking my team really quickly. I'm not sure who my captain will be, but I'm trusting in Morata just because of the sheer number of opportunities he will get. And again, bringing up, I know it sounds like a broken record here, but I think Spain will get to the semis. And so at least that means that I haven't got an extra transfer of somebody like Seferovic or somebody else that I'm not too keen on. And Harry Kane was a little bit too expensive. And I think that would have been over the limit of the number of players that you can have from one team at this part of the round as well. So, yeah, I think Morata was almost like the best of the bunch. He's got some good underlying data, but he's terrible. But you can imagine him picking up a goal against Switzerland. You know, he'll probably get 25 shots and score one of them. He's a bit like Giroud was for Arsenal years ago. And yeah, you can sense from my tone I'm not excited about this pick. It's more out of necessity. So you can rip into Morata all you want, Ben. You can kind of let loose, because I don't like him that much either.
Look, it's difficult. So it's more of a tactical game when it gets to this stage, isn't it? So would I have Morata in or risk transferring out for another -4? Then no.
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
that's the
point. I
point.
think he's capable of scoring. Maybe on occasions he's been a little bit unfortunate. On others, he's just been downright crap. There's no need to sugarcoat it. He obviously scored in the additional extra time against the Croatians to take the Spanish team through. So, you're hoping, you're looking for that, that little bit of sunlight coming through the rainy thunder clouds, and maybe, that again, that's the shot in the arm, that little bit of confidence that he needs to help him sort of click in. Spain are creating a lot of chances, they have done the last couple of games. As long as they continue on that same trajectory, they keep on playing the same way, then, like you say, even with these poor conversion rate, you're still going to have, how many times did we talk about Jamie Vardy in the Premier League? And it doesn't really appeal because he might only touch the ball 10 times in a game. I mean, he might score and he might get an assist, but it's boring. You're not going to get that with Morata because he's in and around. He's getting lots of touches. He's getting lots of chances. You just end up really, really frustrated because they're not being converted. But, who knows? So on that reason, it's not bad. And Immobile,
I was just going to say, before you get on to Immobile, I was going to say, imagine if Harry Kane played for Spain. He'd probably have like 25 goals already in the tournament with the amount of...
Probably already won it.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of opportunities that Morata has had. Oh, God, if Kane had that sort of service, it wouldn't even probably be, the betting firms probably wouldn't even allow you to bet on the golden boot because it would just be him confirmed already. But yeah.
And that was one of the concerns coming into the tournament. Spain looking pretty on the eye. Have they got somebody to put it in the onion bag? And the answer is yes, but can they do it consistently? And when it really matters, then it doesn't, there's nothing that's we've been shown to this point. I would suggest that is happening, and that could be their downfall, and why maybe they're not destined to win this tournament. But they're certainly finding a little bit of a groove. And when you've got those players in like the Sarabia and the Ferran Torres, if they've got those players in behind scoring, well, then maybe that eases a little bit of pressure anyway on them. On Immobile, yeah, look, it's Italy. The only thing for me, and I've just really I'm looking at fan teams. So this is at the time of recording as well. So we still probably have another maybe 30 to 32 hours until the deadline closes. Spinazzola, 60% ownership. Insigne, 38% ownership. Immobile, 47% ownership. I mean, to me, that brings tears to my eyes, thinking to have like anybody of those types of numbers in my team. I like to go against that. I really, really do. I think, and it's just because even if he scores and he gets the points, I'm not benefiting from it in any way, shape, or form. I'm not bothered about sticking with the pack and holding rank. I want to see some big fluctuations and some big changes. And again, that just reinforces my decision to go against the Italians because of such the high ownership numbers. So, of course, I don't want the Italians to do very well because I'm in on the Belgium. But if Italy were to go through, then there's part of me that will have my fingers crossed and wish you all the best with your team on finishing in the cash.
Well, with that lovely note to end on, because it's almost like you're wishing me the best of luck because I've trebled up on them, and frankly, I do need a little bit of luck at the moment. I've had an unlucky tournament of sorts, especially with that round there. I should have listened to you, Ben. That's basically whenever I make a mistake in fantasy football, I should have listened to Ben. That's usually the lesson learned. Going forward, please do subscribe to the channel. We have got some really, really good guests lined up when the Euros is over and building up to the Premier League. We don't want to release it now. We're still teasing away, but we will release it on social media once the Euros is over. And I think you'll be impressed with the sort of calibre of individual we've got lined up. But going forward, we wish you the best of luck and enjoy the rest of the content on the channel. We hope that yesterday's video, so if you've not looked at it, there's a lot of data in there, there's a lot of analysis to help you out with those final moment picks. And yeah, wishing you the best of luck. Handing it over to Ben to sign us out.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I mean, not much more that I can add to that. Just another fantastic podcast. Jason, good luck, and good luck to everybody else, whether it's fan team or, the main Euro fantasy game. It's going to be tough. We're definitely going to need a little bit of luck to navigate this tricky minefield, but fingers crossed we can get through, without any major catastrophes. And we will be back again very, very soon. But for now, and the quarter-final review and team review, we are done.